The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Diana's luxurious countryside estate. The place was serene, with sprawling gardens and ivy-covered walls, yet it often felt empty, a reflection of Diana's life. Widowed for over a decade, she filled her days with charity events, gardening, and hosting occasional dinners. But the void in her heart, the longing for intimacy, remained untouched. This evening, Diana was preparing for dinner with her daughter Vanessa and her son-in-law Jared. Vanessa had married Jared 2 years ago, and while Diana adored her daughter, her feelings for Jared were far more complicated. Jared was everything her late husband had not been: charming, attentive, and kind. He had a way of making everyone around him feel seen, and Diana wasn't immune to his charisma. As Diana added the finishing touches to the table, her thoughts drifted. She caught herself smiling as she remembered a moment from the last time they visited. Jared helping her carry heavy boxes to the attic, his laughter echoing in the quiet house. He had touched her shoulder lightly, thanking her for the meal she'd prepared. It was such a small gesture, yet it lingered in her mind far longer than it should have. Vanessa and Jared arrived, bringing life to the otherwise still home. Vanessa greeted her mother warmly, unaware of the subtle tension that hung in the air. Jared followed, his presence commanding yet unassuming. Diana couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he carried himself, his tailored suit hugging his broad shoulders perfectly. "Dinner smells amazing, Diana," Jared said, flashing her a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Thank you, Jared," she replied, her voice softer than usual. "I always like to make something special when you're here." Vanessa laughed. "She means when we're here, Mom." "Of course, darling," Diana said quickly, but her eyes lingered on Jared a moment too long. As they sat down to eat, Diana found herself watching Jared more than she should. She admired the way he spoke, the way he made even mundane stories sound engaging. Vanessa shared updates about her work and their plans for a weekend getaway, but Diana barely registered the conversation. She was too focused on Jared's every word, every smile. The evening progressed, and Diana's admiration for Jared grew harder to conceal. When Jared complimented her cooking, Diana's cheeks flushed. Vanessa noticed but dismissed it as her mother's usual pride in her culinary skills. After all, why would she suspect anything more? Later, as Jared helped clear the table, Diana found herself alone with him in the kitchen. The proximity made her pulse quicken. She handed him a plate, their fingers brushing briefly. "You're always so helpful, Jared," she said, her tone carrying a warmth that bordered on inappropriate. Jared chuckled. "It's the least I can do. You've been so generous to us." Their eyes met for a moment longer than necessary, before Jared excused himself to join Vanessa in the living room. Diana stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, her thoughts spiraling. "What's wrong with me?" she whispered to herself. She knew these feelings were wrong, but they had taken root deep within her, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to pull them out. That night, after Vanessa and Jared left, Diana sat alone in her grand yet empty house. She poured herself a glass of wine, replaying the evening in her mind. The sound of Jared's laughter, the way he smiled at her, it all felt so vivid, so intoxicating. She convinced herself it was harmless admiration, but deep down, she knew better. Something inside her had awakened, and it wasn't going to be silenced easily. Diana's days became an intricate dance of rationalizing her feelings for Jared. She told herself it was merely an admiration for his character, a longing for the companionship she once had. Yet every time Vanessa and Jared visited, her actions betrayed her thoughts. Weeks after the dinner, Diana found herself standing in her expansive walk-in closet, trying on dresses she hadn't worn in years. She chose a form-fitting emerald gown and spent an extra 30 minutes on her hair and makeup. It was just a casual lunch with Vanessa and Jared, but for Diana, it felt like something far more significant. When they arrived, Diana's efforts didn't go unnoticed. "Wow, Mom, you're all dressed up. You look amazing," Vanessa said, admiring her mother's elegance. Jared nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. That color really suits you, Diana. Diana smiled, her heart fluttering at the compliment. Thank you, Jared. It's just nice to have company. The house can feel so empty sometimes. During lunch, Diana steered the conversation toward Jared's interests. She asked about his work, his hobbies, and his plans for the future. Vanessa, used to her mother's curiosity, didn't think much of it. But Jared began to notice the intensity in Diana's gaze, the way she leaned in just a little too close when he spoke. After lunch, Diana suggested Jared help her move some flower pots in the garden while Vanessa sorted through some family photo albums inside. Alone in the garden, Diana took the opportunity to talk to Jared about more personal topics. "You're such a wonderful husband to Vanessa," she said, her voice soft as she handed him a trowel. "I see how much you love her, and it makes me so happy to know she has someone like you." Jared smiled politely. "Vanessa means everything to me. I just want to make her happy." Diana hesitated before responding, her tone shifting. "You remind me of my late husband when we first got married. He had that same kindness, that same charm." She trailed off, her eyes lingering on Jared. Jared felt a wave of discomfort. "That's very kind of you to say, Diana. I just try to do my best for Vanessa." The moment felt heavier than it should have, and Jared quickly changed the subject, asking about her garden. Diana followed his lead, but the tension lingered in the air. Back inside, Vanessa noticed a subtle shift in Jared's demeanor. He seemed quieter, more reserved. When she asked if everything was okay, he assured her it was, chalking it up to being tired. But deep down, Jared couldn't shake the uneasy feeling Diana's words had left him with. In the following weeks, Diana's attempts to get closer to Jared became more deliberate. She began calling him directly, under the pretense of needing help or advice. "Jared, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I have a problem with my car," she said one afternoon. "Vanessa said you're so good with these things. Could you take a quick look at it?" Jared hesitated. Sure, Diana. I can swing by tomorrow after work." When he arrived, Diana greeted him warmly, her smile brighter than usual. She had prepared a small spread of snacks and drinks, insisting he stay for tea after looking at the car. "You're always so helpful, Jared. I don't know what I'd do without you," she said as they sat in the sunroom. Jared, feeling increasingly uneasy, kept the visit brief. He politely declined Diana's offer for tea and left as soon as the car issue was resolved. Over time, Vanessa began to notice subtle changes in her mother's behavior. Diana became more invested in Jared's life, asking detailed questions about his work and schedule. Vanessa dismissed it at first, thinking her mother was just lonely and enjoyed their visits. But when Diana started suggesting Jared come over to help her with errands or chores, Vanessa began to feel uneasy. One evening, Vanessa brought up her concerns to Jared. "Do you think my mom's been acting different around you? Like, overly interested?" Jared hesitated, unsure of how to respond without upsetting Vanessa. "I think she's just lonely. Maybe she sees me as a kind of stand-in for your dad." Vanessa frowned. "Maybe. I just hope she's not being too much. Let me know if it ever feels weird, okay?" Jared nodded, relieved to have the conversation over. But the truth was, he had started to feel Diana's attentions were crossing a line. The tipping point came during a family barbecue at Diana's estate. As Vanessa mingled with other guests, Diana took the opportunity to corner Jared in the kitchen. "I feel like you've been avoiding me," she said, her tone accusatory. Jared froze, caught off guard. "I haven't been avoiding you, Diana. I've just been busy." Diana stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't have to lie to me, Jared. I see the way you look at me." Jared's jaw tightened. "Diana, I think you're misunderstanding things. My only concern is Vanessa and making her happy." Diana's face hardened. "So you're saying I've imagined everything? That there's nothing between us?" "There's nothing, Diana," Jared said firmly. "I love Vanessa, and I think it's best if we set some boundaries moving forward." Humiliated, Diana stormed out of the kitchen. Jared felt a mix of relief and dread, relief for finally confronting her, and dread for what this confrontation might unleash. Diana's rejection by Jared did not diminish her feelings. It only transformed them into a dangerous obsession. She felt spurned, humiliated, and desperate for control. Diana convinced herself that Jared belonged to her, not Vanessa, and she began to devise ways to manipulate the circumstances to her advantage. Vanessa's work commitments provided Diana with ample opportunities. One afternoon, she called Jared, her voice trembling. "Jared, I need your help. I think I'm coming down with something, and I don't want to be alone. Vanessa told me you're free today. Could you come by? Just for a little while." Jared hesitated. I'll check with Vanessa first." "No need to bother her," Diana interjected quickly. "She's busy and I wouldn't want her to worry. Please, Jared, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't truly in need." Reluctantly, Jared agreed, but his unease grew as he drove to Diana's estate. When he arrived, Diana greeted him wearing a silk robe loosely tied at the waist, her hair impeccably styled despite her claims of being unwell. Jared immediately sensed that this was another one of her calculated moves. "You didn't have to dress up, Diana," he said, his tone cautious. "I thought you weren't feeling well." "Oh, this old thing." Diana brushed off his comment with a laugh. "I just wanted to feel a little more put together. You know how it is when you're feeling down." Jared's discomfort deepened, but he followed her inside, determined to stay only long enough to ensure she was okay. Diana guided him to the living room, where she had prepared tea and pastries. "You're so kind, Jared," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Vanessa is lucky to have you. I hope she tells you that often." Jared nodded, keeping his responses short. "She does." The conversation took a darker turn when Diana leaned forward, placing her hand on Jared's knee. "You know, sometimes I think about how different my life would have been if I had met someone like you before. Someone who could see me for who I truly am." Jared froze, gently but firmly removing her hand. "Diana, I think we need to have a serious talk." Diana's expression hardened. "About what?" "This," he said, gesturing between them. "Whatever this is, it has to stop. I love Vanessa. She's my wife, and I won't let anything come between us. I think it's best if we set some boundaries moving forward." Diana's face turned cold. "Boundaries? You're acting as if I've done something wrong. All I've ever done is care for you. If anyone is crossing boundaries, it's you, leading me on with your kindness, your smiles." Jared stood, his patience wearing thin. "Diana, I've been nothing but respectful to you. If you've misinterpreted that, I'm sorry, but this has to end. I'm going to tell Vanessa everything." At the mention of her daughter, Diana's demeanor shifted from anger to desperation. She grabbed Jared's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "If you tell Vanessa, I'll make sure she never believes you. I'll tell her you've been pursuing me, that you've tried to take advantage of me. Who do you think she'll believe, her mother or her husband?" Jared pulled away, his chest tightening with a mix of anger and fear. "This is insane, Diana. I won't let you manipulate me or Vanessa. She deserves to know the truth." Diana's eyes gleamed with malice. "You'll regret this, Jared. If you ruin my relationship with my daughter, I'll ruin your life." Jared left the estate, shaken but resolute. He knew he couldn't keep this secret any longer, no matter the cost. Vanessa deserved to know what was happening, even if it meant risking Diana's wrath. Back at home, Vanessa noticed Jared's pale complexion and distant demeanor. "Is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Vanessa's work commitments provided Diana with ample opportunities. One afternoon, she called Jared, her voice trembling. "Jared, I need your help. I think I'm coming down with something, and I don't want to be alone. Vanessa told me you're free today. Could you come by? Just for a little while." Jared hesitated. I'll check with Vanessa first." "No need to bother her," Diana interjected quickly. "She's busy, and I wouldn't want her to worry. Please, Jared, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't truly in need." Reluctantly, Jared agreed, But his unease grew as he drove to Diana's estate. When he arrived, Diana greeted him wearing a silk robe loosely tied at the waist, her hair impeccably styled despite her claims of being unwell. Jared immediately sensed that this was another one of her calculated moves. "You didn't have to dress up, Diana," he said, his tone cautious. "I thought you weren't feeling well." "Oh, this old thing?" Diana brushed off his comment with a laugh. "I just wanted to feel a little more put together. You know how it is when you're feeling down." Jared's discomfort deepened, but he followed her inside, determined to stay only long enough to ensure she was okay. Diana guided him to the living room where she had prepared tea and pastries. "You're so kind, Jared," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Vanessa is lucky to have you. I hope she tells you that often." Jared nodded, keeping his responses short. "She does." The conversation took a darker turn when Diana leaned forward, placing her hand on Jared's knee. "You know, sometimes I think about how different my life would have been if I had met someone like you before. Someone who could see me for who I truly am." Jared froze, gently but firmly removing her hand. "Diana, I think we need to have a serious talk." Diana's expression hardened. "About what?" "This," he said, gesturing between them. "Whatever this is, it has to stop. I love Vanessa. She's my wife, and I won't let anything come between us. I think it's best if we set some boundaries moving forward." Diana's face turned cold. "Boundaries? You're acting as if I've done something wrong. All I've ever done is care for you. If anyone is crossing boundaries, it's you. Leading me on with your kindness, your smiles." Jared stood, his patience wearing thin. "Diana, I've been nothing but respectful to you. If you've misinterpreted that, I'm sorry, but this has to end. I'm going to tell Vanessa everything." At the mention of her daughter, Diana's demeanor shifted from anger to desperation. She grabbed Jared's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "If you tell Vanessa, I'll make sure she never believes you. I'll tell her you've been pursuing me, that you've tried to take advantage of me. Who do you think she'll believe? Her mother or her husband?" Jared pulled away, his chest tightening with a mix of anger and fear. "This is insane, Diana. I won't let you manipulate me or Vanessa. She deserves to know the truth." Diana's eyes gleamed with malice. "You'll regret this, Jared. If you ruin my relationship with my daughter, I'll ruin your life." Jared left the estate, shaken but resolute. He knew he couldn't keep this secret any longer, no matter the cost. Vanessa deserved to know what was happening, even if it meant risking Diana's wrath. Back at home, Vanessa noticed Jared's pale complexion and distant demeanor. "Is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jared hesitated, weighing his words carefully. "Vanessa, there's something I need to tell you about your mom." Vanessa's brow furrowed. "What about her?" She's been acting inappropriately toward me," Jared said, his voice low. "She's crossed boundaries, and I think it's important you know." Vanessa stared at him, her mind reeling. "What do you mean, acting inappropriately? Are you saying she—" "Yes," Jared interrupted. "She's been making advances. I've tried to shut it down, but she won't stop." Vanessa's face went pale as anger and disbelief clashed within her. "This doesn't make any sense. Why would she do something like that?" "I don't know," Jared admitted. "But I couldn't keep it from you any longer. You needed to know." Vanessa struggled to process the revelation. "I need to talk to her," she said finally. "I need to hear it from her." Jared reached for her hand. "Vanessa, please be careful. She's not thinking rationally." Vanessa nodded, her heart heavy. She couldn't ignore what Jared had told her, but confronting her mother felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Meanwhile, Diana was unraveling. Alone in her estate, she replayed her confrontation with Jared, her mind oscillating between rage and despair. She convinced herself that Jared's rejection wasn't final, that he could still be hers if she could just find the right way to handle the situation. But as her thoughts grew darker, so did her plans. Her obsession had become a dangerous game, one she was determined to win, no matter the cost. Vanessa couldn't sleep that night. Jared's words replayed in her mind, clashing with her own memories of her mother. Diana had always been a strong, loving figure, albeit controlling at times. But this was unimaginable. Yet Jared's sincerity and distress couldn't be ignored. The next morning, Vanessa called her mother, her voice trembling with forced normalcy. "Hi, Mom. Can we come over later today? There's something I want to discuss with you." Diana, sensing an opportunity to see Jared again, eagerly agreed. "Of course, darling. I'll make lunch. Is Jared coming with you?" "Yes," Vanessa replied, her stomach churning. When they arrived at Diana's estate, the tension was palpable. Jared avoided Diana's gaze, while Vanessa's demeanor was unusually curt. Diana, oblivious to the storm brewing, greeted them with her usual warmth and led them to the dining room. Over lunch, Vanessa's patience wore thin. She set her fork down, her voice cutting through the surface pleasantries. "Mom, there's something I need to ask you." Diana tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Of course, darling. What's on your mind?" Vanessa glanced at Jared, who gave her a slight nod. Gathering her courage, she said, "Jared told me about your behavior toward him. He said you've been making advances." The room fell silent. Diana's face froze for a split second before she composed herself, her expression a perfect mask of shock and hurt. "How could you say something like that, Jared?" Diana gasped, her voice trembling. "Vanessa, I would never do such a thing. He's lying to you." Jared's jaw tightened. "I'm not lying, Diana. You know exactly what you've been doing." Vanessa's voice wavered as she looked between them. "Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Is there any truth to this?" Diana's eyes filled with tears as she reached for Vanessa's hand. "Darling, I would never betray you like that. Jared must have misunderstood my actions. Maybe I was too friendly, but that's all it was. I'm your mother. I would never hurt you like this." Vanessa stared at her mother, torn between the woman she'd always trusted and the man she loved. The emotional weight of the moment threatened to crush her. Jared spoke up, his tone firm. "Vanessa, this isn't a misunderstanding. Diana has been inappropriate with me more times than I can count. I didn't want to tell you, but she left me no choice." Diana's mask cracked, and a flicker of anger crossed her face. "How dare you accuse me of such things? After everything I've done for you, for this family, this is how you repay me." Vanessa held up her hand, her voice sharp. "Enough. I can't take this back and forth. I need time to think. Jared, let's go." Back at their home, Vanessa was uncharacteristically quiet. Jared tried to console her, but she needed space to process. Alone in the bedroom, Vanessa went through her memories, piecing together every interaction between her mother and Jared. The lingering glances, the subtle comments, it all began to add up in a way that made her stomach turn. Meanwhile, Diana spiraled further into desperation. Vanessa's confrontation had been a warning sign. Her grip on Jared was slipping, and Vanessa was beginning to see through her facade. In her mind, Diana blamed Jared for everything. If he hadn't rejected her, none of this would be happening. The next day, Diana called Vanessa. "I need to see you, just you, darling, please." Vanessa hesitated but agreed. When she arrived, Diana's demeanor was subdued, almost remorseful. "I want to apologize," Diana said, her voice soft. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and maybe I was out of line. I've been so lonely since your father passed. I guess I didn't realize how my actions might come across." Vanessa's heart ached at her mother's vulnerability. "Mom, I understand that you're lonely, but this isn't the way to handle it. You need to respect my marriage and Jared's boundaries." Diana nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You're right. I've made mistakes. I just hope you can forgive me." Vanessa hugged her mother, hoping this was the start of healing. But what she didn't know was that Diana's apology was far from genuine. Diana's obsession with Jared only grew darker. She began plotting ways to drive a wedge between him and Vanessa, convinced that if Vanessa left him, he would eventually come to her. She started planting seeds of doubt, subtly insinuating to Vanessa that Jared wasn't as loyal as he seemed. One evening, Diana called Vanessa, her voice trembling. "I hate to say this, but I saw Jared with another woman. I didn't want to believe it, but I thought you should know." Vanessa's heart sank. "Are you sure, Mom?" "I'm so sorry, darling. I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't." Vanessa confronted Jared, who vehemently denied the accusation. "This is just another one of Diana's manipulations," he said. "She's trying to turn you against me." Vanessa was torn. She wanted to believe Jared, but her mother's words lingered in her mind. Diana's game grew more dangerous as she began planning a way to permanently remove Jared from her life. She convinced herself that if he were gone, Vanessa would forgive her, and they could rebuild their relationship. She invited Vanessa and Jared over for dinner, under the pretense of reconciliation, setting in motion a plan that would change all their lives forever. The evening of the dinner arrived, and Diana's estate looked as elegant as ever. The dining table was meticulously set with her finest china, and the air smelled of roasted lamb and freshly baked bread. Diana had gone to great lengths to create an atmosphere of reconciliation, but her intentions were far from pure. Vanessa and Jared arrived, both wary but hopeful. Diana greeted them with a warm smile and ushered them inside. "I've been looking forward to this," she said, her tone almost too cheerful. The dinner began with polite conversation. Diana appeared calm, even affectionate, as she asked about their lives and future plans. Vanessa relaxed slightly, hoping her mother's apology had been sincere. Jared, however, remained on edge, sensing something sinister beneath Diana's composed exterior. Halfway through the meal, Diana poured glasses of wine for all three of them. She raised her glass, her smile tight. "To family. No matter what happens, we'll always have each other." Vanessa smiled hesitantly and took a sip. Jared, suspicious, barely touched his glass. Diana noticed but didn't comment. Minutes later, Vanessa's expression changed. She set her fork down, her hand trembling. "I don't feel well," she murmured, her voice weak. Jared immediately reached for her. "What's wrong? Talk to me." Vanessa's eyes widened in panic as she clutched her stomach. She slumped forward, her breathing shallow. Jared shot Diana a look of pure terror. "What did you do?" Diana's calm facade cracked and a flicker of panic crossed her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling. Jared wasted no time. He scooped Vanessa into his arms and began to carry her toward the door. "I'm taking her to the hospital." But as he passed Diana, she grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "You can't leave," she screamed. "You don't understand." Jared shoved her aside, but Diana wasn't done. Desperation turned into rage, and she grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter. "If I can't have you, no one will," she shouted. Jared turned just in time to see her lunging toward him. He tried to dodge, but the blade caught his side. The pain was sharp and immediate, but his focus remained on Vanessa. "You're insane," he yelled, clutching his wound. Diana stood there, the knife trembling in her hand. Tears streamed down her face as she realized what she had done. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. Jared didn't wait for her to come to her senses. He stumbled toward the door, still holding Vanessa. But his strength was fading fast, and he collapsed just as he reached the threshold. The commotion had drawn the attention of Diana's neighbors, who were already on their way over. One of them burst through the door, taking in the horrifying scene. Vanessa unconscious, Jared bleeding on the floor, and Diana standing in the middle of the room, the knife still in her hand. The police arrived shortly after, arresting Diana on the spot. She offered no resistance, her mind a haze of regret and denial. Jared and Vanessa were rushed to the hospital, but despite the doctor's efforts, Vanessa succumbed to the poison. Jared survived, but the physical and emotional scars would remain with him forever. In the aftermath, Diana was charged with murder and attempted murder. During the trial, her obsession with Jared and her calculated plan to poison him were laid bare. The court heard how the poison was meant for Jared, but accidentally ended up in Vanessa's glass, a tragic twist in an already horrific crime. Diana's once pristine reputation was shattered, and she was sentenced to life in prison. Behind bars, she lived with the weight of her actions, haunted by the memory of her daughter's lifeless body and the man she had destroyed. Jared, now a widower, struggled to rebuild his life. He often visited Vanessa's grave, silently apologizing for not recognizing the danger sooner. The tragedy left a lasting mark on everyone involved, a grim reminder of how obsession and betrayal could lead to unimaginable consequences. The fallout from the events at Diana's estate rippled through the community like a shockwave. News of the crime spread quickly, and soon everyone in their social circle knew the dark truth behind the seemingly perfect family. Diana, once admired for her elegance and strength as a widow, became the subject of whispers and judgment. Her name was now synonymous with obsession and betrayal. Diana's trial was a media spectacle. Prosecutors painted her as a manipulative woman whose unrequited obsession drove her to commit unspeakable acts. Her defense tried to argue diminished responsibility, citing her loneliness and mental instability. But the evidence against her was damning. Diary entries detailing her obsession with Jared, receipts for the poison she had purchased online, and testimonies from Jared and Vanessa's friends who recalled Diana's increasingly erratic behavior. The courtroom was tense when Jared took the stand. Still recovering from his injuries, he recounted the horrifying events of that night with a mix of sorrow and restrained anger. When asked why he didn't expose Diana's behavior sooner, he admitted, "I wanted to protect Vanessa. I thought I could handle it. I never imagined it would end like this." The jury deliberated for less than a day before finding Diana guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, Diana sat stoically, her once vivid eyes now dull and lifeless. Whatever pride or defiance she had clung to during the trial was gone. Life after the trial was anything but easy for Jared. He carried the weight of guilt, blaming himself for not recognizing the signs sooner, for not being able to save Vanessa. Her absence was a gaping hole in his life, and every corner of their home reminded him of her. He sought therapy, but even with professional help, the memories haunted him. Nightmares of that night plagued his sleep, and the faint scar on his side served as a constant reminder of how close he had come to death. Jared eventually moved away from the town where everyone knew his story. He sought anonymity in a new city, where he could start over without the constant reminders of the past. Though he began to rebuild his life, the pain of losing Vanessa and the trauma of Diana's obsession lingered. Behind bars, Diana was a shadow of her former self. The once glamorous widow was now an inmate, her life reduced to the monotony of prison routines. The other inmates treated her with a mix of curiosity and disdain, knowing her crime had involved her own family. Diana spent her days in reflection, replaying every decision that had led her to this point. At first, she clung to the belief that she had been a victim of circumstance, but as time passed, the reality of her actions became impossible to ignore. She had destroyed her daughter's life, shattered Jared's, and ruined her own. She wrote letters to Jared apologizing for everything she had done, but he never responded. Diana eventually stopped writing, realizing that no amount of apology could undo the damage. The community, once enamored with Diana's grace and charm, grappled with the shocking truth. Friends and acquaintances who had once admired her now spoke of her in hushed tones, unable to reconcile the woman they knew with the crimes she had committed. Vanessa's death became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of how unchecked emotions and unaddressed mental health issues could lead to tragedy. The town erected a small memorial in her honor, where friends and loved ones gathered each year to remember her. Years passed and Jared slowly began to heal. He found solace in charity work, dedicating his time to causes Vanessa had cared about, such as supporting victims of domestic violence and mental health awareness. He channeled his pain into helping others, finding a sense of purpose in the process. Though he would always carry the scars of his past, both physical and emotional, Jared found a way to move forward. He met new people, formed new connections, and even began to entertain the idea of love again, though he knew it would never be the same as it was with Vanessa. The story of Diana, Vanessa, and Jared became a tragic part of the town's history, a tale passed down as a warning about the destructive power of obsession and betrayal. Diana's name was etched into infamy, while Vanessa's memory was cherished by those who knew her. For Jared, the tragedy marked a turning point in his life. It taught him the importance of boundaries, the dangers of silence, and the strength it takes to rebuild after unimaginable loss. Though he could never forget what happened, he chose to honor Vanessa's memory by living a life she would have been proud of.